It's the fourth Sunday of Advent. Last Sunday of Advent, we're just a week before Christmas. In the readings this weekend, especially the gospel, we shift. So the last, few weeks, we've been hearing from John the Baptist, who's, as an adult, preparing everyone for the very soon coming of the preaching of the Messiah, of Jesus Christ. But now this weekend, we rewind back to when they're still not yet born, both John the Baptist and Jesus. So the church is wanting to place us in the time right before Christmas, because we are in the time right before Christmas. And today we hear about Mary setting out from Nazareth, going down to the hill country to visit her cousin Elizabeth. And that's a long journey, actually. I think it's like 90, 100 miles, something like that. And you're going from the northern part of Israel down to the southern part, just south of Jerusalem. Very near to Bethlehem, actually, is the hill country. And she's pregnant. And so it's like, why would you set out on a huge trip like this when you're pregnant, just to go see your cousin? What really comes through in the Gospels is the sheer joy and peace that both these women are experiencing. Both of them have become pregnant in miraculous ways. Both of them clearly have been given, messages about the divine beginnings of their children and the divine mission of their children. And both of them are probably very pious Jewish women, and so they're super joyful and at peace with everything going on. And it's almost like Mary has that sense of invincibility that you do when you're everything's just right. And it doesn't really matter what I do, because the Lord loves me. It's that feeling that you have when you're really experiencing the love of another, and you're like, wow, I can just be free now and sort of live and be at total peace because I just know that I'm loved. And this is what they're both feeling. And not just human love for them, but in a really intense way, divine love. And that's what divine love does. It puts us at peace. It gives us true joy that's not fake, not manufactured, but a deep peace, a deep joy, because the divine is touching us. And this reminds me of, just this last week, I was having a conversation with someone who was telling me about that actually when after the passing of his father, he received a lot of consolation, a lot of joy, a lot of peace around watching videos of people who had near-death experiences and hearing their descriptions of essentially their encounter with the divine. And I don't know if you've ever watched it. He said to me, have you ever watched any of these? And I'm like, no. And he's like, Father, you have to. They're really profound, actually. And so I looked one of them up and watched it a couple days ago. And I should have written down the title. It was from spring of 2020, has 16 million views. And it's this guy, it's 20 minutes long. And it's this guy just giving his testimony about when he died for 20 minutes. So he was 27, 28 years old, something like this. And he's giving this testimony, he's probably, I'd guess, in his 60s, So this is decades later. And he describes the whole thing, He's like, I was on the operating table, I think he's in the ER, he dies, and suddenly he's above his body. Said he clearly could see everything in the room. He could hear what the doctors were saying. And he wasn't nervous. He wasn't anxious. He was calm. And then a moment later, he gets whisked away, and he said he almost described it like being kind of in this field. And he describes the way the trees looked, the grass, the flowers. He says the flowers were unlike anything he'd ever seen before. The wildflowers were just spectacular. And then on the horizon, there was this, big white cloud. And in the cloud, he saw his whole life. You know, they say like your life flashes before your eyes. He saw his whole life played out. And he said in watching this, he didn't feel there was anyone like condemning him or even like an exterior person judging him. It was all interior. That he watched it and simply knew. He saw all the good and saw how good it was. And he saw all the wrong he had done and saw how wrong it was. And he didn't need any exterior. It was all just truth right before him. And the whole experience was overshadowed by this tremendous peace and the sense of being at home. And then eventually he's told that no, he has to go back. And that was a sad thing for him, that he wanted to stay. And so he tells this whole story. And, you know, if you're like me, when I watch these kinds of things, there's always like the piece of me that's skeptical. You know, you're watching this testimony and you're like, well, anyone could do that. Anyone could say that. You know, you could watch a couple of these videos online and sit down and film one and play it. And so you'll have to watch it. But what was so compelling to me, other than like the story he was telling, but probably even more compelling, was the man himself. Here he was. He's clearly a simple guy. He's a nobody. He's not like a famous person or anything. He's probably, like I said, in his 60s, decades later, and his face, everything he was saying, he truly believed. And it was causing him to tear up just a little bit, kind of the whole time. And his wife was in the room just off camera, and he kind of looked at her a couple times. But he said, this experience changed my life. And it changed my life because I no longer am afraid of death at all. All I want is to live my life well. I want to do the good. I want to love. I don't know if the guy was Catholic. He never said if he was Catholic or anything. He referred to our Father a couple times, so I think he's at least Christian. But nothing in what he said is at all contrary to the faith. Like, everything he says lines up with everything we believe about God. And what's so striking to me, too, about this experience of the divine, which always leads to joy, just spontaneous joy, true, lasting peace, is how much then the words of the Mass reflect everything that he experienced. And everything that the experiences the Lord has gifted me with throughout my life, essentially, usually in prayer, all line up with these words in the Mass. Like after the Our Father, I say, Lord, deliver us, O Lord, from every evil and grant us peace in our days. The whole Eucharistic prayer the one I pray with all those long, all the litany of names that I rattle off, we're saying, Jesus, allow us one day to dwell with them. Another thing that this guy mentioned is he knew there were other people during this experience. And he knew in particular there was one person next to him escorting him, and he felt at home. We are asking Jesus when we celebrate the Mass to give us the peace of heaven, the peace of the divine, and to allow us to be at home with all those who are waiting for us, our loved ones who have gone before us, and the great saints who are praying for us. As we approach this Christmas, what marks Christmas is it's the moment where the divine dipped down into our world and touched us so we could experience his peace and his true joy. Let's ask Jesus to keep our hearts open. He's going to do it again this year. He does every year at Christmas. He grants his peace. Jesus, prepare us so that we can receive the peace you want to put into our hearts and into our families this Christmas.